Hello everyone, welcome back to Just My Stupid Opinion. I'm Adrian Lloyd. And happy 2020 everyone. I decided to, I took a little bit of extra time off. I didn't feel like recording anything after the new year for a while, but now I've wanted to get together and talk about everything that's been going on since the new year. I just want to talk about the situation that ended up coming between the US and Iran. Because that was, I don't think I was seeing it from the same lens as a lot of the other people on there. To be perfectly honest, when it kind of made me lose a lot of respect for people that were in the political discussion, because when we were discussing what was going on with Iran, I saw a lot of people that were trying to push for war. These were people in Canada, people in the United States, people who are supposed to be nationalists, people who are supposed to want to end the wars. But then after everything that happened with Iran, they were more than happy to push for the idea of sending soldiers into Iran, which would not have ended well. This is not Afghanistan or Iraq. Iran has a stronger military than both of these countries, so that would be more difficult. There would also be the fact that the terrain is much different. If you pay much attention to the terrain in Iran, it's a lot of mountains, a lot of areas that would make it very difficult for U.S. soldiers in order to get through and get across. And it would require a lot of helicopters and planes to move troops, the mountains would also leave them open to being shot down by RPGs. It would not have ended nearly as well as people thought. There were a lot of people that thought that the U.S. would just march on through and destroy that country the way they destroyed Iraq. But the fact was that the amount of people that were more than happy to send these young kids off to die for their war because they felt that they had been disrespected as part of the country. And this had to do with everything that ended up happening with Soleimani, everything that had to do with the attack on the U.S. Embassy base, the response by Iran to the death of the assassination, really, that's what it was, of Soleimani, the assassination of him, and then how they ended up doing a missile attack against several U.S. bases. And the thing was, too, is Trump ended up saying that there were no casualties, but apparently there were some reports that were coming out about how there were medical transports that were then, after that missile attack, that were then being sent off to Germany there was a hospital down over there. So it's quite possible that there were more U.S. casualties than Trump wanted to let on. But the thing is that this war with Iran, as much as people don't want to think that Trump's been pushing for it, it's been quite clear this is what he's been doing since he came in office. He's taken every opportunity to take the shots at them, every opportunity to try and antagonize them, and the whole point of that is trying to drag them into the war rather than America being the one to declare the war. And I don't think and it looks like Iran didn't take the bait on that. The thing was, too, is there were some things that Trump was trying to push that didn't actually have he didn't have any evidence for. So this would be like how he was trying to claim that Soleimani the reason that they ended up taking him out had to do with the fact that he was partly responsible for the attack on the U.S. Embassy on New Year's Eve, which there's no evidence to back that up. But people like Trump and people like Mike Pompeo, they ended up saying that the reason that they ended up taking out Soleimani was because of an imminent threat. Now, this was not the case, because we found out that John Bolton ended up tweeting after Soleimani was killed and said that this was a long time in the making. He also talked about regime change in Iran. There was also Lindsey Graham, when Congress was bitching at Trump, saying that he didn't end up running this past them. It was Lindsey Graham who ended up coming out and saying, well, Trump told me about this when we were golfing on Monday in Florida. And the strike ended up taking place on, I think it was the 3rd, which was a Thursday, if I'm remembering correctly. Anyway, so the point is that this was not an imminent threat. In fact, the threat that they were trying to make reference to, and the use of the word imminent, this is a word that Mike Pompeo was very careful to use. And it's because he's not using the term imminent in the way that you and I mean it. the way he's using the term imminent has to do with what is in the Bethlehem Doctrine. So the Bethlehem Doctrine was written and adopted by Israel, the US, and the UK. We know that for a fact. We have access to not the Bethlehem Doctrine that they adopted, but we have other versions that were rejected that was adopted. And the point is that in this doctrine, it specifies on what the term imminent means. So if you're facing an imminent threat, this allows you to take action. But the thing is the burden of proof is so low that you can pretty much take action on just about anything. So what this means is that the US does not have to have proof that there's an attack coming. They don't have to have dates or a location where it's going to happen, or even evidence of mobilization of troops or equipment in order to prove this. More or less, they just have to believe that that's what is the case. In fact, under the Bethlehem Doctrine, if you're somebody who in the past has posed a threat to the UK, the US, Israel, that alone is enough to be considered an imminent threat. And this is why Mike Pompeo was using this term, imminent threat, so much. The other thing he ended up talking about and making reference to had to do with the 600 US troops that were killed by Iran. Now, they weren't killed directly by Iranian troops, but what was saying is during the Iraq War, the Iranians were providing support for the militias that were fighting against the US, and roadside bombs, IEDs, these were the things that were being used a lot of the time in this guerrilla warfare that was being fought. And a lot of these supplies that were used to make the IEDs, these were supplied by Iran. The thing is that actually, once again, turned out not to be the case. Because the type of IEDs that they were using were actually more common with Hezbollah in Lebanon. And the Shiite militias were actually copying those type of IEDs. They were copying those type of IEDs. And that's what they were using against the US. Another thing that they were doing was C4 was a main component of these IEDs. Now, at one point, from these IEDs, there was some C4 that was located. And it had the same batch number from C4 that was found on a ship. It was boarded by Israel soldiers, and they found C4 on that ship. The ship was owned by Hezbollah. And in that, they found the C4 from the same batch number, which would suggest that it's actually coming from Hezbollah rather than it was coming from the Iranians. The thing is, too, the final thing, is that a lot of the material that was used for these IEDs, there were factories that were raided in Iraq, and they found that this is where the material was coming from. But they also managed to trace back this material to places such as the United Arab Emirates and a couple of other Arab countries. But you couldn't actually directly trace it back to the Iranians. So that actually is not true what Trump was saying on that. But it seems very clear that this is what they're trying to do. In fact, the other thing about the 600 dead Americans, which makes up 17% of their casualties in the Iraq War, it was actually a talking point that started by Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney ended up starting this back in 2007, I believe it was, 2006, 2007. He started using this talking point because he had actually come forward. Him and Bush were trying to put forward a plan with the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And they were putting together this plan to, while they were in Iraq, to make airstrikes, to use airstrikes against Iranian targets in Iran. So they would start a war with Iran at the same time. And the Joint Chiefs of the Defense Staff rejected this unanimously. So after this ended up happening, Cheney was trying to drum up support from the American people in order to attack Iran. And this is where this was coming from. He manipulated the data in order to make it look like it was going back to Iran. And this has been used ever since in order to justify that Iran was the one that ended up killing those 600 Americans, even though it wasn't. So that being said, we also got to talk about the downing of Flight 752. So when this first ended up happening, there was Iran rejected that they were the ones who fired it down, even though it seemed pretty clear because it came just hours after what ended up happening with their missile strikes against U.S. bases. So it was just hours later, and then this flight ended up getting taken down. Now, this was trying to get spun from the very beginning. People were saying it was engine failure. They were saying it was engine failure, problems with the flight itself. Didn't turn out to be the case. Then it was said, oh, it was shot down, and then Iran was saying, oh, we didn't shoot it down. We didn't shoot it down. And then they finally admitted a couple days ago and said, you know what? It was our fault. It was accidental, though. And now what we're hearing about this is that apparently what ended up happening is there was a loss of communication between a loss of communication with the guys who were running the what was it called? It was the anti-aircraft artillery that they were using. I don't remember what it's called right now, but anyway, they were the one who ended up firing off this shot. Apparently, he lost contact with command, and then they thought it was a cruise missile that was coming in, so he had to make that decision immediately. He had like 10 seconds to make that decision, and he made the decision to fire. Now, let's just say that that's true. Let's just say we take that. It seems very convenient that it chose that specific time to go down. That communications went down right in that moment, right in that crucial moment, that moment where he has to fire that rocket at a jet that has 170 people on board, including what they're saying is, well, it was supposed to be 63 Canadians, and then the numbers were revised to 57. But let's be clear on something. The media has been pushing that these were 57 Canadians that were killed. These were 57 Iranians living in Canada that were killed. Let's not try and pretend like these were Canadian-born, Canadian-raised over there, and then it was shot down. These were people that came from Iran to begin with. Now, it's awful that they're dead. Nobody wants to see civilians get killed in something like this. But I also, right off the bat, when I was hearing this story come out, and even when they were starting to say it was shot down, I was questioning some of this. And one of the reasons I was questioning it so much is because I was looking through these photos that they were releasing, and it didn't really make sense to me. Now, first, actually, I've got the video here that they ended up releasing. Hold on. Now, one of the reasons that I was wondering about this video right here had to do with the fact that, this guy, whoever is recording, happens to be filming at the right time, at the right place, and when the missile hits the plane, he has no reaction to it. He's not surprised, he's not shocked, not even excited or happy. You'd figure that if you just happen to see something like this, you would have some reaction to it, but he had absolutely no reaction. And then as it continues, so we end up got hit there, and then we can see where the plane is right there. We can see the little light of it. And then very quickly, it disappears. Now, from the other angles that we were showing, you could see where the plane was the entire time as it was going down. And I'm not sure if oh, that's camera angle. Hold on. No, I don't think I have it. But anyway, is that in the other angles that they were showing, you could see the little fireball in the air as it was going down until it eventually exploded. So I was questioning that. And then there was also the question as to the origin of this. So this was actually originally posted by Bellingcat. And Bellingcat it was the Twitter account for Bellingcat.com, who's supposed to be an open source investigative journalist or something like that. I only briefly looked at him. But it had to do also with where this who ended up actually being the original person. So we had Bellingcat, who sort of put it out there, made it famous. And then we had this guy here, Nariman Garib, who was the one who actually originally posted it. And one thing he said about that was the fact that he was in contact with the source. I'm in contact with the person who sent this video to see if I can get a version of the video that has metadata on it. As far as I know, he has not posted anything that says that he has the metadata on it. But this guy, Nariman Garib, he actually has been talked about before. So, there's our guy right there. This is the man we're talking about, Nariman Garib. And then there he is here, an Associated Press article from a year previous, in December 13th, 2018. AP exclusive, Iran hackers hunt nuke workers, U.S. officials say. So what this article talks about is how these guys are part of a, a London-based cybersecurity group, CERTFA, to track how a hacking group often nicknamed Charming Kittens spent the past month trying to break into the private emails of more than a dozen U.S. Treasury officials. So it seems to me he might be part of a London-based cybersecurity group, but my guess, if this is who they're tracking, who are trying to get into U.S. Treasury officials' emails, that they're probably connected back some way, at least to the UK government or the UK intelligence agencies. And what they're talking about here, this hacking group from Iran that was trying to break into the US Treasury emails, it was after US President Donald Trump reimposes harsh economic sanctions on Iran last month. So then he's the one who also ends up gets sent to him and ends up getting released. So I'm a little suspicious of that alone. So that was one of the reasons that I question the authenticity of this video. Now, the other reason is the pictures that ended up coming out. Because we had here's a picture that ended up getting released from the crash site, and I started to notice right off the bat, for instance, take these shoes that are right here, are front and center. Those are surprisingly clean and in surprisingly good condition for just having been in a plane crash, for just having been hit by a missile, and then on fire as it goes down to the ground, and then eventually exploding. Because that's what ended up happening, was that it actually exploded. Actually, I forgot too. Let's go back to that video real quick. This video here. There's something important that has to be pointed out. Right there. If you pay close attention and if you look at the buildings, you can see it very easily. There was actually an edit done in this video. Watch. There you go. Right there. You keep going back. Right there. Right there. Right there. So I was also wondering why is this video edited? For what reason would they have edited a video if it was legitimate? Now the thing is it's very possible that it wasn't an edit, because what you can do, it doesn't look like this was a live stream, but what can happen in a live stream, you lose connection and you lose a few frames and it jumps. You can also get that in a recording. You can also get your frames get dropped and then it just kind of jumps around a little bit. But that doesn't really happen on a camera video like that. Like, you could actually see what I'm using right now, OBS. If my settings aren't set properly, then that can happen. So then the video might jump around, might freeze for a second. It looks like an edit almost, although it's not. So that is the possible, but I don't think that would be the case, because I've never seen that happen on a phone's camera. So that was one other thing that I was kind of wondering about. And then it was how hard the corporate media was pushing to show that this is a verified video. This is from the New York Times. Oh, did they go back? Oh, interesting. That's very interesting, because this article, which was showing this article that was showing the video, was free for a few days, because the New York Times always put their stuff behind a paywall, and the first time that I saw it, and I checked back a few different times, it was always open. You could read it, and now they want you to pay for it. But I'm pretty sure someone probably grabbed an archive of this. Now, the main thing is that they went to a greater length to prove that it's been verified. We verified it, it's pretty much what they said. But so did MSNBC. MSNBC went to great lengths in order to prove that the video was legitimate. So all this was kind of making me question it. And then again, going back to the videos here, the pictures here, we have being in a plane crash, being on a plane that exploded into a ball of flames. As we can see here. Those shoes are in surprisingly good condition. Oh, Jesus, I left the picture up. You couldn't even see it. Those shoes are in surprisingly good condition for just having been through something like this. So that made me question, but it's not the only thing. It's not just that. Here's a slipper that was from the plane crash, and a little singed on the bow, yeah, but again, very good condition for what it just went through. Here we have books of paper that apparently did not catch fire when the plane exploded. And then we have this. This is supposed to be the missile that impacted against the plane. Now, I'm no expert. I'm not even close to being an expert. But the thing is what we're seeing right here is what houses the warhead. So we all know the shape of a missile. It's long cylinder tube, and then we got this end right here. So this is the part that would, right on the very tip, is where it's your detonation fuse. So if you impact with it, that's what triggers the warhead to explode. Now, these can be exploded manually or through proximity as well, but it still doesn't make sense why this piece would be around. The main body of a missile holds the jet fuel, and then the bottom part is the guidance system. So it'd make more sense if we had those that were still around. But the actual head of it that's holding the explosives themselves survived somehow. That didn't really make sense to me. And then this was just sort of the description showing where everything was found, what direction it was, where the pictures of where that video was taken. So it was all this push, this big push that they did in order to justify that all this was legitimate. Usually they only go to this extent when they're trying to actually push a narrative. And let's not forget that the media was very, very thrilled about the idea of Donald Trump going to war with Iran. Hold on, that's something else here. Yeah, here it is. So this was also the interesting thing, which probably by now is pretty well known, but there seemed to be 6 people on the Iranian flight were nuclear scientists. That's quite interesting. And actually, I found it quite interesting for what ended up happening just this morning. For those living in Ontario, you probably got an alert system, didn't you? An alert system. And that system, let me see, should still be the hashtag. What was it? False alarm? Yeah. So you probably got, this was, I believe, a second one that ended up coming. Oh no, here it was. So this is the alert system that was sent earlier this morning. This is a Province of Ontario emergency bulletin which applied to people within 10 kilometers of Pickering nuclear generation generating station. An incident was reported at the Pickering nuclear generating station. There have been no abnormal release of radioactivity from the station, and emergency staff are responding to the situation. People near the Pickering nuclear generating station do not need to take any protective actions at this time. Remain tuned into local media for further information and instructions. So Pickering is not far from Toronto, where we have an Iranian population of 100,000. Might be nothing, but considering what ended up happening with the plane that ended up going down, considering what ended up happening with them being nuclear scientists, and now we have a problem at the Pickering nuclear generating station. Seems a little too much of a coincidence for me. So this is why I was questioning the official narrative about this story. And I'll admit, to some degree, I really am not convinced still. I still have some questions. I don't find that my questions were properly answered. And as I was talking before, here's NBC. How NBC News verified video of Ukraine plane allegedly hit by missile. And they went to this whole extent, this huge extent, just to say, no, this video is legit for sure. All these reasons are why I really was questioning, and still do, the authenticity of what ended up happening with that plane. Now, I do not agree with people that are saying that this is Donald Trump's fault, the plane getting shot down. Now, no doubt that the events that ended up happening, no doubt that the events that ended up happening were in relation to what ended up happening between Iran and America since the new year. And there's a lot of criticism you could throw at Donald Trump. You can throw out his conduct. You can throw out about how the other thing actually about what ended up happening with Soleimani is the fact that Soleimani was in Iraq that day and he was welcomed there by the Iraqi government. The Iraqi Prime Minister ended up coming out in which he said that he was scheduled to meet with Soleimani that day because Soleimani was there on behalf of the Iranians in order to discuss a peace treaty, or at least a cease in hostilities of what's going on in Yemen, since the war in Yemen is really, it's a proxy war between Saudi Arabia and Iran, who don't like each other. So that's why he was there. And the Iraqi Prime Minister was asked to be a mediator for those talks by Donald Trump. So Donald Trump used diplomacy in order to bring Soleimani out into the open and then assassinate him. Now that's actually a big breach of protocols, because whether officially written down or not, for centuries, there have been an understanding that when two opposing leaders are discussing peace terms, discussing an end to hostilities, there are rules that you do not try and assassinate them. You do not try and engage them. They come to the table, even if the fighting's still going on between both sides. You leave them alone. They have their talk. Maybe they agree on peace terms, maybe they don't. But then they go their separate ways, they go back to their side, and the fighting continues. And if they're killed during that fighting, so be it. But when you use diplomacy in order to draw someone out in order to kill them, that's a huge taboo. At the same time, that's not going to make anybody trust Donald Trump and his diplomacy. Because this is going to be something that they can point to from here on out, saying that you want to make a negotiation with Trump. Well, look what happened to the last guy that did that. So that's a huge taboo, both in politics and in war, that Donald Trump ended up doing. So there's a lot of criticism you could throw out to Trump and how he handled this situation. But you cannot blame, unless it comes out that America was the one that shot down that plane, you cannot put this on Donald Trump. You have to put this on the Iranians. That's where it's that who are the people who need to own that. They're the ones that fire the missile. Regardless of what we already know, they were still the ones that fired the missile that took down this plane. They're the ones who own this. So no, Katie Simpson from the CBC, this is not Donald Trump's fault. This is the Iranians' fault. And they're paying for it right now because we're seeing the protests that are going on there against the Ayatollah for what they ended up doing, for shooting down this plane, how they felt that they were lied to. Part of me, too, is wondering whether this is part of the regime change that John Bolton was talking about. Whether this is another coup that is being implemented in their country right now, because this already ended up happening in 1953. 1953, I believe it was, where the CIA ended up backing a coup of the Iranian president, I believe, at the time, in which they installed the Shah of Iran, who was a U.S. puppet. And then came 1978, and the Iranian people ended up rising up against the Shah of Iran and throwing him out. And this is what is the cause of the Iranian Revolution. Since then, radical Islam ended up taking over. Because even in that time, soon after the Iranian Revolution, you see the photos of women walking around. It looks like they do over here. It looks like, they're in jeans, they're in shirts, their hair is flowing. And then radical Islam took it over, Wahhabism took it over, and then all these women ended up looking like, like mailboxes, as Boris Johnson would say. Now, got off my chest what I wanted to say about, what I wanted to say about this, what I want to say about Iran. I suppose the other thing that I would add on to that is one reason that I was extremely critical of Trump during this whole situation is the fact that it was quite clear that a war with Iran was not going to benefit the U.S. It seemed quite clear that the one who was pushing for the war with Iran was in fact was Benjamin Netanyahu. Benjamin Netanyahu has been trying to get a war with Iran for decades, and he was the one that would have benefited from it. He was the one who's been talking about the Iranian nuclear program for decades, but he's not been talking about it. He's been saying that they're going to get the bomb, they're going to get the bomb, they're going to get the bomb. He's been saying this for decades. And he's always saying, they're months away, they're a year away, they're weeks away from getting it. But it doesn't appear like they actually do have a nuclear bomb yet. But he's been saying this since, it was Benjamin Netanyahu that appeared before Congress in 2002 in order to talk about how they need to invade Iraq and they need to remove Saddam Hussein because of weapons of mass destruction. And even in that, he says that, he ends up saying that this is going to be a great benefit for the entire area, and as well as going to send a message to Iran. And then we got him in 2012, I think it was, or 2013. Here he was at the United Nations. Iran's about to get the bomb. He even came out recently, said, Iran's, they're about to get the bomb. It hasn't happened yet, but he's the one pushing for it. And right when it looked like America was going to go to war, they pretty much stepped back and said, oh no, we want to sit back and not do anything. We want America to go do the fighting for us. And even Benjamin Netanyahu came out and pretty much said, this is an Iranian and American situation. We're not involved with this. Well, yeah, you are. Because you were the one who has been trying to push for this. Netanyahu, the war hawk. And then, when the going gets tough, the tough get going, as they say. So this was not going to be a war in benefit of America. It was going to be a war that benefited Israel. And that's why Netanyahu was pushing for him for so long, and the reason he backed out of it right as it looked like war was going to happen.